To begin today, Bill McFarland is professor of anthropology here at Johnson County. He completed a BA in anthropology from the University of Central Florida and an MA and PhD in anthropology from the University of Buffalo. His primary area of research is the political economy of southeastern Mesoamerica. Cooperation and well-being are also current research interests of his. He's beginning his 18th year here at the college. In his time with us, he has taught a number of classes, including, let's see if I can get all these in. Department Cultural Anthropology, Physical Anthropology, World Prehistory, Archaeology, People and Cultures of Mesoamerica, Ancient North America, Archaeological Field Methods, and recently he taught an honors forum centered on goodness, human cooperation, compassion, and kindness. In addition, he's also been the co-director of the International Archaeological Field School in Honduras and the director of the Midwest Archaeological Field School. Aside from his duties at the college, Bill is in his words, newish father. And wrangling a 3-year-old has, as you said, basically obliterated any previous hobbies and interests you once had. Some of us understand.
Yeah.
Some of us understand. For our lecture today, Professor McFarland is going to speak on Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Regarding the book, he says, quote, "Though few people might consider it a great literature, Kitchen Confidential is an engaging memoir and a fun read. I found this book at a pivotal point in my career, and I think Bourdain offers some valuable insight for everyone. Students trying to find their place and those at the middle or even end of their current jobs can learn a lot about what matters most in professional life." And I think that's a nice take on the book, I really do. It's also a great book if you want to work on your knife skills or know which day of the week to order seafood at a restaurant. And maybe we'll find out about that today. At the end of the remarks, we often have time for questions. We will be keeping true to our sort of 40, 50-minute timeline. So if anything comes to mind, please keep it and be ready for him. Professor McFarland.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'm really grateful that so many of you showed up. This is great to actually see people together in a room again. And then whoever is watching at home online, hello, internet. I kind of want to start by setting some expectations. As Michael alluded to, I'm not sure that this is a great book, but we don't have that's a pretty okay book series, or that's not a bad book series. But I think it's a meaningful book. It's certainly a lot of fun. It's engaging. It is eye-opening and inspirational. But even in his introduction, Bourdain tries to lower expectations about what this is himself. This is a collection of stories that he has told to other cooks. This is a book for cooks, people who work in professional kitchens. His literary heroes are Hunter S. Thompson and William Burroughs, and he idolizes Iggy Pop and Bruce Lee, though I'm not sure Bruce Lee shows up in this book. He is not aspiring to be a great novelist, but he does want to tell the truth about his experience in the kitchens, and I think it comes across really well. The structure of this book is laid out like a multi-course menu. There's an appetizer where he gives you his introduction, tells you who he is very briefly. In the first course, you get where he came from. You get his childhood, his development, his sort of discovery of food and the life in the kitchen. The second course is the confidential in the title. He sort of tells you all the things that you didn't really want to know about what was happening in the kitchen before, during, and after you order your meal. Some tricks of the trade that you would learn if you were a chef. Not really an expose, that's not what he wants to do, but he does want to tell you the truth about what's going on in the kitchen. The third course of his book is kind of his war stories. He tells you about the difficult middle part of his career when he sort of engaged in all sorts of borderline criminal, definitely unethical behavior, but still showed up to work and did the best of his ability at the stove. And then it shifts to dessert, where he kind of tells you it's a sort of a position paper, really, on what he thinks is going on in the restaurant business and what makes a good chef and what makes for a good professional work habit. And then he concludes with coffee and a cigarette. And this would kind of point us towards where he would be going in the next phase of his career, though he didn't know where he was going. And when you read this in 2000, you don't know what comes next, but we do. We know where he went today. And so he kind of talks about the implications and perspective he has on the role of food and cooking and restaurants in the world. Okay, so that's my book report part of this. And then I may or may not come back and talk about anything that's actually in the book. This book is sort of a memoir. And a memoir is about the author trying to articulate what they think about themselves, right? And so it can be objective, it can be honest, it can be difficult, it can be biased, it can be an exaggeration, it can be an outright lie. And Bourdain, in his conclusion, says Kitchen Confidential is all of these things. But we really do get to learn who he is as an individual, what he holds valuable. A big part of this book is this sort of love letter to professional cooks and cooking and what that life is like. And it is very clear that he loves this life and he loves the people he works with, though he doesn't necessarily trust them, and neither should you. He loves this lifestyle. And you also find out how much he loves food, and he has a passion for food. And so you get a sense of who he is and what he holds to be really valuable as you read through this book. Now, this book, like every book, is a time capsule. Right? Like when it's published, and maybe you get a revised edition where there's a foreword and a extended afterword or something like that. But this book is set in 2000. Okay, it was written in the late 1990s, and it was set in 2000. He had been working in kitchens for over 25 years at the time, and I think it's sort of important to put this into context. Okay, so I'm looking around the room, a lot of you weren't here on the planet in the 90s. Okay, some of you have shown up more recently than that, but a lot of us remember the 90s pretty well. And the 90s were relatively peaceful and prosperous. Like the big debates in the 90s was whether like Windows 98 was way better than Windows 95, and you had an opinion about that, I guarantee you. But there was also this growing genre in media of subversive, alternative searching for meaning and purpose. Right? And this absolutely fits within that. Those of us who were aware of kind of the corporate cubicle culture that was comfortable, that's more alliteration than I like, were not really happy. They were making money, but we're not really happy. And here is a glimpse of a hard life that's not in a cubicle on his terms that everybody connected to. It was really exciting to see what other people do. The freedom that comes from leaving your cubicle, from taking off your tie, from doing hard, difficult work, doing it to the best of your ability, going home tired, going home dirty, and then getting up the next day to do it all again. There was something really fun about that and something subversive. So like, this came out the same time as like Fight Club. The movie Fight Club came out. They're similar. This is an idea that was out there in the zeitgeist. We also know that the next 20 years had in store for him, right? Bourdain would admit that his life changed profoundly after the publication of this book. Like, he had written 2 books before this. They were like murder mystery books. No one cared, right? People read them after the fact, but no one cared at the time. He published this book, his life changed. He became a public person, a famous person. He became an expert of speaking in an engaging way on the lecture circuit. He produced a number of travel shows, wildly original, successful travel shows, in an authentic voice that you see in the book, that you see there, that's undeniable. He produced a number of shows on cooking and chefs and chef life in particular. He told us about that. He won all of the awards, right? He sat down with a president to talk about the state of the world. For a guy who, in his own terms, was not a very good cook, he did a lot, okay? We also know that after this book was published, he got divorced, he got remarried, he became a father, and sadly, in the summer of 2018, he took his own life. And I think it would be a little bit irresponsible of me not to acknowledge the sort of elephant in the room that is this talk is scheduled in the middle of Suicide Prevention Week, a talk that happened right before me in this room, deals with this difficult topic. We have resources available if you or someone you love and care about in your life is going through these struggles. You don't have to do it alone. It's here. Okay? There's no shame in it. There is something to be said for looking at the arc of Bourdain's life and realizing that you don't really know, as exposed and as public as he was, you don't really know what's going on in somebody else's life. And if you're struggling, there are people who are better at this than me can walk you through that. Okay, so what do we know? What do we know about Bourdain? What do we know about his life? Who the heck is this guy? Well, when you read through this book, you realize that this is a guy who is comfortable being uncomfortable. Kitchens are not a comfortable, nurturing environment. They are uncomfortable, and he revels in that. Each page, there's something that would make me quit that profession. And he's like, and I wanted more, right? So he's a guy who is comfortable being uncomfortable. He's also somebody who seeks extremes and is searching. He always seems a little bit unfulfilled. Like there's something he's trying to prove, okay? When he is exploring food for the first time, exploring kitchens for the first time, exploring drugs to the extreme, he's trying to fill something in his life. He's trying to fulfill something in his life. And in all of the interviews you hear from him at the time that this book came out and afterwards, he's always kind of surprised that it's going on this long. That he's expecting the party to end at any minute and he's going to be back in front of the deep fryer, in front of the grill, working. So there's something there about this notion of like, he is searching and exploring and trying the next thing, always ready to try the next thing. He holds himself to a very high standard. He holds the people around him to a very high standard. He works hard. He clearly enjoys himself and he plays hard. He's the sort of person who you'd love to have a couple of drinks with, maybe a meal with. I would not want to work with or for him. The sort of vocabulary that he uses, the attitude that he brings, the expectations he has for people around him. That's not my style. It works for him, doesn't for me. All right. What else do we know? I should say that this book deals with this moment in his life where things were coming together. Things were really starting to come into focus. Whatever difficulties he had, he'd overcome them. Whatever failures he had, he was in a point in his life where things were going well. That was a very similar point in my life when I found this book. So I was beginning sort of the long slog of my dissertation work. I'd gotten my undergraduate, go Knights. I'd had a real job, and I had an adult job that I held down for over a year. Wow. I'd gone to grad school. I had done well. I had built a reputation in the field and in the classroom and in seminars. I talked in public venues like this. I had done well. And it felt like things were coming together. This was right around the same time as I met my wife. So like, holy crap, somebody likes me. Like, there was some stuff that was falling into place in the same way that it was falling into place for him. And so like, I connected with this story, right? He had had failures, I had had failures. He had had successes, I had had successes. His attitude and his work ethic and his desire to be a guy you could count on was something that I connected with. Like, I'm not gonna be the superstar. I'm not gonna be the best one here, but if you're working with me, you know what you're gonna get, and I'm gonna give you my best, okay? And so that definitely comes through. There's a bunch of what you would expect in an autobiography here, the memoir stuff. You're gonna get his discovery of food and its power on a family vacation to France, right? So he's young, he goes there, he doesn't like anything, he's grumpy, he's reading comic books, and then he discovers that his parents leave him in the car so they could go in and have a good meal. And he's like, what is going on in that restaurant? And so he decides, I'm gonna start eating this stuff that they think is too good for me, the stuff that I turn my nose up. And he found that food is pretty exciting. And in spite of what everybody else around him was thinking about a kid's attitude towards food, he was gonna eat it. And he found that he liked it. Okay? We discover that as a summer job after college, after his first year of college, he starts working in Provincetown at a restaurant as a dishwasher, and he loved it. And that set his course for the rest of his career, where he decides, you know what, I like this lifestyle. These guys in the kitchen, the celebrity chefs didn't really exist in the 70s, and certainly not in Provincetown and in Cape Cod. These guys were rock stars. They're the closest thing to rock stars that he could see and he wanted in. And so that set his course. He tried, he had swagger, he was bad at it, he failed, he was embarrassed. He went to culinary school, he came back with a vengeance. He was gonna show them, right? So a lot of his accomplishments come from trying to prove other people wrong or change people's perception about himself. Okay. Let's see. One thing that I will say about his character is that it's clear he thinks this is something you can develop. This is something you can work on, you can grow. It's not something you're born with. Through mentors, through role models, through practice, you can develop character. And he calls out a number of individuals as role models, as mentors in this book. And I think that's a good lesson along the way, is to look for the people who are doing what you want to do, only better, and follow them and follow their examples. Okay. All right, so part 2, who cooks? What's going on in the kitchen? He says that there's three types of cooks, okay? 3 types of chefs. There's the artist. They're annoying. They're fussy. They're precious. They're the superstars. They're specialists. They have the best bread. You can't stand them. He doesn't. He says that there's exiles, people who could not cut it in any other business. So they end up in the kitchen, right? They can't be anywhere else, so put them where no one is looking. They're there. And he says then there's the mercenaries. They're the people who do the job for money and they do it really well. That's who he is, and that's who he likes working for. And there's this quote that I found that, 20 years ago that I just love. I've written it down a number of times. This is the one that I think really inspires me in my professional career, and it is, cooking is a craft, I like to think, and a good cook is a craftsman, not an artist. You show up, you do the work, you do it as well as you can, you fix the mistakes, and you do it again, and again, and again, and again. Right? Skill is something that you gain through practice, attention, and experience. It's not something you're born with. It's not something that you should be precious about, but it's something that you should work towards. And he definitely works towards that. And that's who he sees in the kitchen. Okay, so what are these craftsmen up to? Well, the fun bit of the book is what he tells you about what's going on in the kitchen on the other side of the pass, and it's a lot of stuff that maybe you didn't really want to know about. There's a chapter in here called A Day in the Life, and if you're thinking of going into cooking or going into a professional kitchen, you need to read this and read it again, because it tells you exactly what a Friday night is like at a successful bistro if you're the head chef. It starts early, it goes late, and it doesn't stop. It is a master class as an author in show, don't tell. He can tell you, I'm good at this. That's a sentence. You read this paragraph and you know he's good at this. He's got expertise. He's thinking about everything that's going on in the kitchen, about what was ordered, what didn't show up, who's out sick, which waiter is on the floor, which one should be on the floor, which deliveries didn't show up, what the specials are tomorrow, what's in the locker, what's in the cooler. He's got all of this going as he's preparing people's food. Okay? That is expertise, and he demonstrates it very well. Okay? Okay, then what people really picked up on was the thing that I don't think was the most important stuff in his book, but it was sensational. Okay? It was the stuff about why you should never order seafood on a Sunday night. The seafood special on Monday is a way to get rid of the stuff that's going or has gone bad. The nights of the week to eat in a restaurant are Tuesday through Thursday. Those are the regulars. Those are the people who come back. That's who the cook is cooking for. They're giving you their best work on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. Friday night and Saturday night, he's trying to get through the crush. He's trying to get the food out. It's good, but he doesn't give it his best attention because there isn't that much time. Don't eat brunch. Cooks don't care about it. Cooks don't want to make brunch. Every time he's lost his job and had to weasel his way back into the restaurant industry, he gets a job cooking brunch. He doesn't want to do it. No cook does. Okay? The specials for brunch are leftovers from Friday and Saturday. You don't want that. Okay? Unless you know the chef personally and you trust them, don't get mussels. Right? They'll make you sick. So there's all of these sort of inside pieces of advice that people picked up on in terms of the morning news shows would have them on. So I shouldn't eat fish. And it's I wrote 300 pages on my life, and that's what you got out of it. But don't eat the fish special on Monday. Just don't do it. Let's see, what else do we say about his life here? He mentions that you should be nice to your server. Like, a lot of this stuff is about people on the other side of the pass. But be kind to your server, your waiter, your waitress. Observe their body language. If they're saying, yes, the brunch is delicious, pay attention. They know what is suspect and what should be avoided. Okay? As good as his attitude about the profession is, and this is clearly, he really cares about the life in a professional kitchen. What also comes through here is his passion for food, right? So you can there's this biographical stuff, there's the stuff that he loves about the life in the kitchen, and then through it all is this love of food. He notes, as he sort of develops himself as a kid, that food had power. It could inspire, it could astonish, shock, excite, delight, and impress. It had the power to please me and others, and this is valuable information. And so clearly, he does love food. And he, despite his warnings about what not to eat, he has this great attitude about how you should really approach eating. And you should be open, you should be enthusiastic, you should do it. Right? Your body's not a temple, it's an amusement park. Enjoy the ride. Why not take a chance on the good stuff? Eat without fear, tearing into the local stew, the humble taqueria's mystery meat, the sincerely offered gift of a lightly seared fish head. Right? I know what I want it all, I want to try everything once. Right? So don't be fussy about your food. Now, for those of us who have followed his career in sort of travel shows, this attitude probably got him into some trouble. And early on, I think there was this kind of like, let's see what he'll eat sort of attitude that a lot of producers had, where, yeah, he ended up eating the still beating heart of a cobra. Most famously, he ended up eating the lightly warmed, very rare anus of a warthog. Yum. I don't know that that's what he had in mind when he wrote this. And it was also something that sort of disappeared from his shows within the first or second season. He was just like, this is not a sideshow. I'm going to eat what people here eat, and I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to be respectful about it. I want to try it. I'm excited to try it. I want to have it at least once, but don't make me eat the weird. There's other shows out there on the Food Network where you can eat the weird stuff. Get them to do that. I'm going to be respectful to people, their cuisine, and their culture. And so he got away from that pretty quickly. Okay, food. What I should mention here is that I was talking to my sister, hi Laura, on his influence on me, and she pointed out that pretty early in the 2000s, my attitude about cooking and food changed, and I think it had a lot to do with reading Bourdain. And there's a section in here about how to cook like a pro. Get yourself organized, work clean, work fast, right? Whenever I cook, I like to set up for success. I like to work clean. I like to think about the ingredients. I think there's kind of two types of people in the world: people who sort of get set up and they work in an organized, orderly fashion, thinking about the entire process from start to finish. And then there's other people who just start cooking, and they get every pot out of the cupboard, and they chop everything up, and halfway through they're going to the grocery store because they forgot the thing because they didn't read ahead, right? That's not me. I like to get organized. I like to cook. I like to think about how all the pieces fit together, the sequence, how it all works together. And I think that, to me, is what's really fun, is once you're organized, then you can have some fun. It can, at times, go a little too far when you've decided that for a camping trip you want to have some s'mores, and so you're going to get organized. Yeah, you can sort of start to lose some of the fun there. But anyway, it had a big influence on me. Cooking is something that you can do. You can figure this stuff out, and you can always get better at it. All right, so what's his legacy here? How are we supposed to sort of view this pivotal moment in Bourdain's life and his career? Okay. He writes about this this trip he took to Tokyo, called Mission to Tokyo, where he has to open a sister restaurant to LaSalle, which is his restaurant in New York. They're going to open one in Tokyo, and they got to figure out how to make the food that's made in New York, or the food that's made in Tokyo taste like it's made in New York. And so he goes. I think this is the first time he'd been to Japan, certainly the first time he'd been to Tokyo, and it's sort of a classic fish out of water story, right? Like, here he is, head and shoulders taller than everybody around him, doesn't speak the language, but he's going to try it. He's going to figure out a way to eat like the locals do. He's going to figure out how to talk, how chefs talk in Tokyo. He's going to try all the food. He's going to explore all the places. He's going to get drunk with businessmen. He's going to find like the best sushi place down an alley and around the corner. He's going to experience it all. And in all of this, he wants to learn, he wants to explore, and he wants to be respectful. And if you look at what comes next in his career, those three things show up again and again and again. He wants to learn, he wants to explore, and he wants to be respectful. His attitude about other people's cultures is a high watermark, something to emulate for all of us, right? And he's not an anthropologist. He didn't finish college, right? But he absolutely has an ethnographic, unbiased view on how to approach other people who see the world differently from him. Okay? Often his way in is through food, but he's going to be respectful. He wants to learn what they think. He doesn't want to tell them why they're wrong. He wants to figure out these points of connection. Okay? That's something that shows up later on again and again. If you were a TV executive in 2000 and you read Mission to Tokyo and you couldn't see like a hit travel show there, you were in the wrong business. This is clearly a strength of his, a character that he has that was profound. He also, I think, not just in terms of television programs, but also in terms of how we approach celebrity chefs and sort of the culture around cooks and cooking. I think he had a big influence on where we are today. If you were watching TV in the 90s, there were a few celebrity chefs. There were a few cooking shows. You could find Iron Chef Japan, the original Iron Chef, which was just insane, right? And it was like, you were watching it for like the voice dubs and all this stuff. It was insane, right? He had no respect for celebrity name above the restaurant chefs. He liked the professional chefs, okay? He dedicates a whole chapter to Scott Bryan, who, for all of the debaucherous activity that Bourdain engaged in, Bryan went the other way. Instead of taking like head chef jobs at a restaurant that was about to fail, Bryan was like, no, I'm going to learn how to do this cuisine. I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to pick up a skill. I'm going to approach this as a piece to a bigger puzzle that is my professional life. Okay, so Scott Bryan is somebody he absolutely respects and doesn't have a cooking show. The only celebrity chef that he has any respect for is Julia Child. And he says, you know, her recipes, they sort of lack snob appeal, but they absolutely work. And when you're in trouble, you go to Julia. And so this is the celebrity chef that he likes. Now, we can all think of like where we've ended up with celebrity chefs, and they're all over the place. Some of the funnier stuff throughout the book is like every chapter he takes a hit at Emeril Lagasse. Like he's fuzzy. At one point he's an Ewok. Like he is merciless towards Emeril. It's fun to read. There's no celebrity chef that gets any love at all except for Julia. What I do think his influence is not just making fun of these folks, but it is thinking of the chef as important in terms of social commentary. In the 90s, when a chef talked about food, that was it. Today, when a chef talks, they talk about farming, they talk about the environment, they talk about people, they talk about sustainability, right? They talk about culture. They are the social commentators of everything that we put and other people put into their mouths. He sort of fostered a whole genre of people that we pay attention to because they pay attention to food. So if you think of Jose Andre with the World Central Kitchen, if you think about somebody like David Chang and Momofuku, right, completely revolutionized the way that we eat by opening up what a restaurant experience is and what food is supposed to be. Somebody like Sean Brock, right, who like Southern food used to be seen as like biscuits and fried chicken. He's like, you are missing the point. There is culture, there is tension, there is cuisine south of the Mason-Dixon line, and let me introduce it to you. We care about what they say because they have a voice that we can trace back to somebody like Anthony Bourdain. Kind of running close to the end here, and so I want to bring this up. And the last chapter of his book is kind of a commencement address, advice for aspiring cooks. When Michael reached out to me and said, hey, you want to do a pretty okay book lecture, I said, yeah, let me think about it. And this is the first book that came to mind because it tells us about what it means to be a professional. This is advice that he gives on if you want to make it in the restaurant business, right? Be fully committed, learn other languages. He says specifically Spanish, but I think any language that you learn tells you that you want to be respectful of another culture, that it broadens your horizons. Don't steal, try not to lie. You can't always get away with that. Be on time, no excuses, don't blame others, be accountable. Despite the injustices and indignities, mind your attitude. Every workplace has this. You can't control what happens around you, you can control how you feel about it. Read some more, and have a sense of humor, you're gonna need it. This is the sort of advice that I think of when I think about my students who are trying to figure out what their career is, how to be a professional. And it doesn't matter what the career is going to be. What is it you want to do as a person in that career? How do you want to be a professional? This is a book that shows you what it means to follow your passion. And it's not about following your bliss or whatever that means, right? It shows you that if you're going to follow your passion, that if you're going to truly pursue a career, you're going to fail a lot. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be challenging. People are going to cut you down. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have some successes, and you're going to enjoy it all along the way. You're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Okay. This is what it means to be a professional, whether you're in academia, right? Whether you're in a kitchen, whether you're in corporate America, don't do that, right? Wherever you go, there are ways to be accountable. There are ways to be professional, and he talks about them in the context of cooking. Okay? It's also pretty good advice for anybody who's in our career, at the middle of our career, near the end of our career, where we've been doing the same thing for 18 years, and it's a grind. It's also fun, and that's a nice thing to remember. Okay? So, if you haven't read it, this is a good place to sort of stop and give you the advice. Go pick this up, go read it. We have a few minutes here for Q&A. I want to start with a question for you guys, though, which is how many of you have worked at some point in your career in the food service industry? Yeah. Isn't it awesome? Yeah. He talks in here, you can put your hands down. He talks in here about how people came up to, out of the woodwork, came up to him about the times that they worked in the kitchen, or the times that they were a busboy, which is what I did, or the times that they were, a server, as like the best time of their life, right? This is a time period in everybody's life where they went, they did hard work, they enjoyed it, they had a good time, and then they got up and did it again the next day. Okay. All right, other questions?
If you have questions, we'll hand the mic to you, and we have time for a few of them.
It was great to hear you talk about one of my favorite books. And I haven't read it for years, but I'm just curious about how you think the Me Too movement has altered our perspective on the way we would have understood Bourdain then and the way we might understand it now.
You'll get your $20 after the talk is over, because there's a whole piece I had at the beginning that I skipped over. When he wrote this, he had a progressive view of women in a very masculine environment. And he was showing respect to women in this very difficult arena. And his view would change over time. In the 2014, 15, 16, somewhere around there, he became a big ally in the Me Too movement. So his perspective would change over time. I find it a little bit difficult to read 2000 with a 2022 mindset, because when you really look at what he's saying, he's saying, man, women are great in the kitchen. They're as debaucherous as the men. They're as criminally bent as the men. They are men. Is essentially what he's saying. Is he's like, the best women in the kitchen are behaving like men, and they're not behaving well. So there's definitely some growth that takes place over the course of his career. And the image he has of his kitchen is a pirate ship, and like everybody is sort of like cutthroat and going for it. He gives a counterpoint to that with people like Scott Bryan, who like that's a calm, reasonable, orderly, respectful kitchen. And so he's like, this is where I came from, but there's certainly other possibilities that are out there.
Any others?
Thanks so much, Bill. I was wondering, how many times have you actually gone through this text, and every time you're talking about now that kind of like later in your career, you're getting a different perspective from it, you're getting something different during graduate school. Have you gotten something different out of the reading, or do you find yourself going back to the same passages that are inspiring for you?
No, it's different every time. I read it quickly over the summer and then very carefully, kind of critically before this. I got to do a book report in front of people. Oh my gosh. So yeah, like I read it very critically. And this last section through, it became very clear that there are some flaws in this book where it's not an arc of a career. It's not a 3-course menu. It's a collection of essays and funny stories that they kind of organize together. It feels like he's got all of these essays, he's got these great stories, he's not sure if he's gonna get another book deal. I'm putting everything I've got into this one book. And so it does feel like, is this the last chapter? No. Is this the last chapter? Like end of the Lord of the Rings, it just keeps going and going and going. It's fun, but it keeps going. I've probably read this maybe half a dozen times, but each time, like there's times I read through it and I think, oh, there's some good tips in there about how to get organized in the kitchen and like have a sharp knife and, you know, how to cook. And so I think about the food. And then there's other times I think about profession. And there's times I think about like, you know, sex and drugs and New York in the 80s and what that must have been like. Because it's not my experience, but like, wow, that's an experience. You know, so there's a voyeur aspect to it. There's a lot that's in this book. And there's a lot that I haven't talked about. I mean, there's entire chapters I haven't even discussed. But yeah. If you're going to start somewhere, I would say Day in the Life. And if you like that, the sort of relentless writing style and description of life in the kitchen, you're going to like the whole book. If you don't like that, you just read one chapter. No big deal.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, everybody.